I hope tonight just to be able to quickly cover some of my experiences, what I witnessed, what I saw, and try to keep it at that, and maybe a little more of a personal touch, because that's probably where I'm more focused. For anyone that doesn't know, the AIPPI program started in 2001 when the World Council of Churches were approached by the churches in Palestine to help out. As a result, this program started the following year. Our team had around 35 in it. My actual team, which was in southern Hebron, there was 4 of us, 1 from Austria, 1 from Philippines, and 1 from Holland. Our main role was to be a non-violent protective presence, looking at humanitarian and human rights issues. We also tried to work to help the many international organizations out there, which I'll touch on a little later. There's so many great organizations working throughout the occupied lands. And I just, this map is too detailed to really look at, but I'll be able to touch on a couple things. The red line, the border all the way around is the border from 48. There is a wall that you can see intruding well into the yellow areas. That's I guess probably almost twice as long as the actual border. In between is called a seam, which I'll talk about later. It's a no man's land, except for the people living there. It's critical to a couple things I want to talk about. The yellow sections are A and B, which I almost talked about at Remus, and there's a couple of slides later I want to talk about. But mainly blue is Area C, which is where we were focused. I was in southern Hebron Hills, down in the bottom below Hebron. For the most part, I was in Jericho and Jerusalem, which I'll have a couple of slides to show a couple of things there that happened. Some people have asked that I sort of, to put it in context, where Israel is. It's right next to Jordan, Syria, Egypt is south of it, and Lebanon is above it, just on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean. What Amos was talking about, the far left one is where Palestine was pre-47. As we go through to where it is currently, the current Palestinians, they describe it as Swiss cheese. I think there's 277 separate little areas. That's basically A and B, which Palestine has various levels of control over. All of the rest, the Israelis have the control of, the Israeli government, except for the Gaza Strip down on the left side, which they virtually do because they control the land, air, and water access. This shows one of the tents, one of the communities that we visited. On a regular basis, we had to help out this family because they had no water. The only water that they could get was from rainwater. The cistern they had was broke. You can't get permits for new cisterns, otherwise it'll be demolished. So they had an underground cistern from years ago that we helped get the material so they could repair it and actually have water. This small shack, the family lived in with they shared with their chickens. It was made out of pallets and some pieces of canvas. This is another tent home that we went to. It was, I think, 7 people shared this. Three girls and the mother, and the rest were the men. This was just before winter. It doesn't show it very well, but the whole tent is covered with holes and whatever. They had no toilet, no water, no electricity, nothing. They're the most generous family, like all of the families that we met. But the last time we went to see them, they didn't have anything to give us to drink. Every place you go in Palestine, they won't let you go without having a tea or a coffee with lots of sugar. This one, we had to wait while she sent her son over the hill on a donkey to come back with some orange juice she brought before we could leave. But the 3 daughters had great big sores on their face. All of them were sick. They all had problems because of the unhealthy conditions that they were forced to live in. The women were forced to go to the washroom by squatting on open ground right beside the highway. No privacy. I mean, it's awful. This tent was in Sucia, which I'm going to do, the next three slides are dealing with different levels of Sucia. This is a small community that could be destroyed any day if it hasn't been in the last couple of days. With every place in the community's got demolition orders, and that, like almost every community in the Area C has, if not full, majority of their residences are under demolition orders. The main peacekeeper, non-violent peacekeepers for the Palestinian community live in this community. It's hard to see, but they have no roads, they have no electricity, they have no water. They did, shortly after we left, get a couple of water tanks donated to them, but the army came in and seized the water tanks and a tractor, their only tractor that they needed for farming, because they didn't have a permit for the water tanks. Above this hill, which I'll show in a second, is the Sucia settlement, the Israeli settlement that had paved roads, electricity, water, trees, the whole works. This light over the top is the historic site of Sucia, which the people in this community were kicked out of in '86. They were forced to leave because it was determined to be an archaeological site. This archaeological site, I went to visit with another EA without our vests on. We had a tour. There was a really pleasant young Jewish lad that showed us videos. He told us nobody had lived here for over 1,000 years. It was a Jewish community, and he was right. I honestly believe he did not know, because the Israeli government has a program where they almost ignore totally the existence of the Palestinians. None of the road signs, none of the maps, none of the tourism brochures, the education programs, none of them refer to the Palestinians. It's like they never existed. So this young lad just believed. This is the Sucia settlement up above with their trees and nice houses. Right next to it, on the left, is an army watchtower. They're always armed with machine guns, army standing there watching over the Palestinian community. I've sat in a tent with the kids while 12 soldiers would be standing on the side of the hill opposite with their machine guns facing down at us for no reason. We're just having tea. This is one of the many caves that a lot of the Palestinian lives in. I stayed in this one personally, probably 7 or 8 weeks on Friday nights. They run electricity down with their solar panels, but one of the reasons we had to stay there because the settlers would come down and destroy the solar panels. They would come down and chase their sheep away. So we were there as a protective presence a couple of days of the week, and we did this sharing it with other international organizations like the White Dove. Awesome people, I'm telling you. This is a closed street, if you've heard about in Hebron. In 2000, they closed 2,000 shops, moved all of the Palestinians out of there, put an Israeli settlement right in the middle of it. It's probably one of the most violent settlements in all of the West Bank. These are all EAs, like myself, given a tour by the Breaking Silence. They were giving us a tour. The Palestinians are not allowed in there, basically. So these are 3 of the 4 Bedouin leaders that we met briefly when I was up in Jordan Valley. We were there, 40 villages were supposed to be destroyed the next week. It hasn't happened yet. They're going to be moved into small enclaves, living on social service the rest of their life. They're active shepherds and farmers, but if this happens, they're just going to be relegated to one of these little enclaves. Now, this was one of the most unpleasant, well, it was probably the most unpleasant job that we as EAs felt we had. Every Sunday morning, we had to be at this checkpoint. There's 600, roughly, checkpoints in the West Bank, different kinds, agricultural, whatever. We get there at 4 o'clock, we get there before 4, there would be over 500 people crowded into this room and then lined up outside, all to go through one turnstile. In 3 hours, 6,000 would go through that one turnstile. One day, we were there and they're climbing over each other and jumping the fence. One guy jumped right in front of me at this post, broke his ankle. He laid there for an hour and a half before he could crawl back out because nobody could get to him. It's inhumane. It's an awful situation. This is another checkpoint. go, and I'll show you the next slide in a minute, but this is a small community on the other side that is in the seam. There's also an Israeli settlement over there. There's nothing else. The wall actually finishes on the right-hand side. On the left, the wall is supposed to be built, but it isn't. It's gone into a desert. There makes, to me, absolutely no sense for this checkpoint to be there. The settlement is pretty violent with the small community that's there. I've interviewed the leader in the Palestinian community several times, but he said it's a very lonely existence because nobody's allowed to visit. His son got married in September, couldn't have the wedding there, and his wife can't move in. They're totally isolated. In October, I think, or no, it was September, 3 of his sons were out shepherding, and 7 Israeli settlers came and beat them up and put one in the hospital for several days with concussion. As per normal, the Palestinian shepherds were arrested, detained for several hours. Nothing ever happened to the Israeli settlers. The soldiers that we had toured, the breaking the silence, they said that their main job is to protect the settlers at all expense, even above themselves. You never see anybody actually prosecuted, or I haven't anyway. This is, at the bottom, you can see at the very bottom, at this point here, it juts in. That's where this little community is. That's the seam. On the north, there's a lot bigger. All those blue portions are the seam too. This is the wall. At points, the wall is twice as high as the Berlin Wall ever used to be. It's huge. Other places the wall is wire fence with not barbed wire, but razor wire on the top. So, but it's all still considered the wall. That was just out of Bethlehem, I think. This is one of the towers. It's probably the tallest one in our area. It was just to the east, I think, of that first tent that I showed you. But everywhere you go in Palestine, there's observation towers. Susha, there's 3 overlooking that community. It's like one big penitentiary. And I've been in a penitentiary, but not as a prisoner, but I've been in them. And it's exactly the same. I mean, it's just oppressive. You're always being watched. This, and I can't dwell on this, we had 2 days of presenters on the water situation, which Amos talked about. It's awful. I think the settlers get roughly 670 liters compared to 30 for the Palestinians are actually on the water grid. A lot of the Palestinians aren't on the water. They have to truck it in, cost them $2,500 roughly in Canadian, which is basically a year's wages almost, pretty well for some of them. So they can't build cisterns because since 67 you can't get permits, and anything without permits is destroyed. One of the things that we did, but not as much as some of the other areas, is escorting kids to and from school. We walked them about 2 kilometers because otherwise they'd be harassed and rocks thrown at them. We provided excuse me, protective presence for the shepherds. This particular shepherd, while we were on midterm break and get instruction, he was being, protective presence was being provided by a couple of the White Dove young volunteers out of Italy. They were assaulted and the cameras smashed, and the shepherd was assaulted by a couple of Israeli settlers. As in the case, the 2 White Dove volunteers and the shepherd were arrested. This is Farwar, one of the refugee camps, roughly 10,000 people. We were in Jerusalem on the 11th of August, ready to go down to our southern Hebron Hills, when we got word of a shooting that had happened in this community. So when we got down there, we went to the community the next morning. A 12-year-old boy had been shot on the 10th in the back, 9 in the morning, dead by an Israeli soldier. Absolutely no provocation, absolutely no excuse. There was nobody around. A few days later, the Israeli army, 3 of the senior officers got on the TV, apologized, and said there'll be a full investigation. There has been nothing released. No update on this. This community itself, it's awful. The poverty rate is 10 times worse than it is in the rest of Palestine. The level of education is low. The housing is awful. It's a horrible place to live. But there's a ray of sunshine there. We went with a group of kids that were drama kids that were early teens for boys, very articulate in English, and all want peace. All have no hate for the Israel. They just want to live in peace. Well, there on one occasion, this is one of the 3 survivors since '48. They all still have the key, which represents going back to their home, which they never can. I think it was 521 roughly communities that have either been destroyed or taken over by the Israeli government since '48. These other 2 chaps are like grandsons. Around this huge room were a whole number of his relatives. Majority of them, like the grandson in the middle, all bore bullet wound holes from run-ins with the Israeli army. Every Saturday morning we had to go to land actions. It's basically a theatrical thing, but if they don't do it, they would lose this land. Israeli families, their kids, would go here for 3 hours, light a bonfire, play, and then leave. If they didn't come on one Saturday, then the land would be forfeited to the Israeli settlement, which is on the other side of that hill. I was very fortunate one day to catch these Israeli settlers planting trees. It was on a land that was deeded since the Ottoman Empire to a Palestinian, but unfortunately you couldn't go just pull the trees out. You had to go to court, which cost money. And the reality is too that by the time this ever goes through the court, because of the length of the time the trees have been planted, they're going to give this land to the Palestinians, to the Israelis too. It's just, there's no way for the Palestinians to win under the current system. It's all stacked against them. This is a chap we went to visit last month. He had 500 roughly fruit trees, mellow trees destroyed May before we got there. We went to check on the status if he was going to replant them. The land had been now declared out of bounds, military zone, so we can't plant them. But this is an example of every place we went, the hospitality, the compassion, they had nothing. But we had a heck of a time getting out of there. The food is the typical food they have, the bread, the chicken, the rice. This is a small A-frame tent. We're sitting on what would be their bed at night. To the left is their pantry and warehouse. On the other side is a cook shed. This is what they have. Down below is a cave, or below this tent where their sheep are kept. I'm getting into now the series of slides on demolitions. It's awful. I mean, this place here, we went to in July, I forget how many residences, animal shelters, a toilet that was donated, totally destroyed because they didn't have permits to build the tents, which they can't get anyway. All of these families have to move in with another family that's always already crowded, which creates tension, divorces, domestic assaults, and a lot of the kids are very traumatized because of it. It just goes on and on. I was in Jerusalem and went to a couple demolitions. This shop here, they came and destroyed this and a couple other things I'll show you in a minute. There was a $100,000 machine here for metalworking. They destroyed his whole shop. Across the street, they destroyed a barn with the chickens in it. And around the corner, they had just purchased land for further development. They'd landscaped it. They came and tore them all up. No demolition orders on any of it. This guy was a great guy. He's where every visitor stops and sees. Salomon, this was in front of the community taboon, where they make all the bread for the whole community. This is what's left of the taboon as a result of a demolition on the 27th of October. To the left of this, you can't see it, there's an entire hill that's part of their grazing land for their sheep. The Israeli government has turned it over to the settlement for future development because their deed is too old. It dates through 30 or 40 years. This is some of what's left of the demolition. This guy, which you see in one of the displays outside, he'd been married for about 1.5 years. He had a 4-month-old baby. He worked full-time. He was going to university. This house that he was in was his dream. On one side of him was this mother's house. On the other side of his house was the sister's house. All of them gone. He is obviously he's devastated. This is going back down to where the cave is. Down below, we used to have to walk to different villages in the desert, and this is also where the military used to have their exercises. I had to tell you that in the middle of the night, where we didn't have a cloud for over 2 months, standing on these hills, you felt God there. But you know, when you talk to God, you say, why is this happening? Why in a land where David walked and Muhammad walked and Jesus walked and the disciples, why is this happening? I never did get an answer. So, you know, I struggled while I was there. I phoned the minister, and since I've been back, I've talked to her and several other people trying to get a word to describe how I felt over there. And only until this weekend, we just had a re-entry 3-day, 4-day thing in Scarborough. I think the word that I was looking for is heartbroken or heartbreaking. It's awful. The people I met were absolutely incredible, and I don't know what the word is, because they're living through this oppression. They're living through all of this stuff, and they just keep going. And they laugh, they smile, they have, and they give. They give no matter if they don't have anything. You're welcome into their home right now, and you're offered whatever they got. At no time did I meet one person with any expression of anti-Semitism. All they want is peace. All they want is to get their rights. They want to have the same rights. They want to be able to have land. They want to be able to move around without having to go through checkpoints, to be able to have a job. It's pretty simple. So I think, you know, I just can't understand why that can't happen. They're not a threat to anybody. Yeah, I never met one person that even was a hint of violence. I would strongly suggest, you're going to hear some later, that you become informed. There's some very reliable information sources. There's things happening almost every day. Demolitions, shootings, but we don't get it through the main media. There's lots of books, lots of websites. If you want to get a hold of me through Susan, I'll provide you whatever I can get. I've got so many sources that would probably give you accurate information. But become informed on both sides, so that you, and I'm saying both sides of the whole issue, so that you really can talk informed about it, and then write a letter. Write a letter to the Prime Minister, write a letter to your MP. Become an EAA. If you're with the United Church, and I don't know, do what I did. I've done a lot of things in my life. This, without a doubt, is probably the most incredible thing I've ever been involved with. It's a life-changing initiative to go over there. If I can, I'm going to go back. I'm probably reaching the age threshold, and I got to lose some weight, but I hope to go back. I mean, it's an unbelievable, rewarding experience. I'd like to. There's lots I could rattle on here, but I want to finish with a thing that was just sent me today, and I'm not going to tell you the starfish story because Susan already talked about it. I've told it all over Switzerland and Palestine and Canada, so. And it came from the book I Shall Not Hate, which is a great read. But this quote came today from Gila Seversky. She's an Israeli peace activist. We cannot be a light unto the nations while we are still an occupying power. If you really care about Israel, you'll care about its soil and its soul. Its soul is being eaten away by the occupation. So if you want to be a really good friend of Israel and end the occupation, demolitions, I think there's been roughly 48,000 demolitions. I keep thinking of things so far, as of the first part of this year, since '67 to earlier this year. It's a tragic situation, what's going on over there. Thank you.